If you're ready for another tale of loyalty, fear, and the kind of courage that only humans seem to understand, then make sure to hit that like, comment, and subscribe button. Your support helps stories like this reach the stars. Now settle in, because this one begins where mercy and power collide. The chamber of the Galactic Council shimmered like the inside of a dying sun, layers of gold, obsidian, and glass suspended in a halo above the void of the capital world, Asterion Prime. Thousands of delegates from 100 species watched from tiered balconies, their forms glimmering in muted bioluminescence or cold chrome. Every breath in that hall felt borrowed, every movement deliberate, every gaze fixed upon the creature in the center of the chamber. It stood motionless within a containment sphere of flickering blue energy. 3 meters tall, sinew coiled beneath armor like scales that caught the light in shifting shades of black and silver. Its eyes, amber, predatory, almost human, surveyed the council without expression. No struggle. No sound. No defiance. Just stillness, like a storm waiting for permission to begin. By decree of the Galactic Council, intoned the High Speaker, a translucent being whose many eyes blinked in deliberate unison, the creature designated Karath of the Void is to be terminated immediately following this session. Its crimes, mass destruction, insubordination to the Allied fleets, and the destabilization of 5 colonial systems. A murmur rippled through the spectators. Some watched with satisfaction. Others looked away. Few noticed the single human standing at the foot of the dais, fists clenched, jaw tight. Captain Elias Rourke didn't look like much beside the towering aliens surrounding him. Just another human in dark fleet gray, broad-shouldered but mortal, carrying a lifetime of scars behind calm blue eyes. Yet when he stepped forward, even the guards, massive reptilian wardens, shifted uneasily. With respect, he said, voice steady but carrying iron beneath it, your information is incomplete. The High Speaker's eyes swiveled toward him. Captain Rourke, humanity holds a single seat on this council, recently granted. You will not use it to defend an abomination. Elias met the speaker's unblinking gaze. You call it an abomination because it fought your wars better than your armies. Because it obeyed orders when your admirals fled. You call it dangerous because it learned too quickly what obedience costs. The chamber stirred again, voices overlapping in translated static. A dozen species whispered across comlinks, some in outrage, others in disbelief. The speaker's voice sharpened. It annihilated entire divisions, Captain. Under my command, Elias said. Every life it took because I ordered it, and when the fighting stopped, it stopped too. Tell me, does that sound like a beast to you? The words hung in the chamber, heavy and deliberate. For a heartbeat, even the hum of the containment field seemed to quiet. Then laughter, cold, synthetic, broke from one of the counselors, a crystalline being from the Fallery Dominion. You humans mistake loyalty for virtue. You created a weapon and now you pity it. Elias turned toward the containment sphere. The creature, Karath, lifted its gaze to meet his. No plea, no rage, no confusion. Only patience. It had not moved since the trial began, not when accused, not when sentenced. Just waiting. Elias swallowed hard. Weapons don't wait, he said quietly. They fire. They kill. They break. That thing in there, he's waiting for me to tell him what to do. Because once, a long time ago, I told him to stand down. Gasps echoed. The High Speaker struck the dais with a resonant clang. Enough. You speak of this monstrosity as if it is a soldier. It is not. It is the last remnant of a genetic war machine program that nearly doomed the frontier. And yet, Elias replied, voice rising, without him, the frontier would have fallen. Without him, the Dravari swarm would have burned half your worlds. You owe him your lives and you repay him with execution. A flicker of unease spread across several alien faces. Memories of that war were still raw, the tide of insectoid invaders, the desperate defense of the colonies, the unthinkable casualties. Karatha's name had become myth, a story told to frighten cadets. Few knew he had fought for them. The speaker's tone hardened. The council's decision stands. Termination will proceed at dusk. Your presence here, Captain Rourke, is a courtesy, not an invitation to insubordination. Elias's hands trembled, not with fear but fury. You think killing him will make you safe? You're afraid of what he represents. Something you can't control. Something you can't categorize. You look at him and you see the worst parts of yourselves. He stepped closer to the containment field. The guards aimed their pulse lances but Karath did not react. Elias's reflection merged with the creature's towering frame in the glassy surface. I told you to stand down, Kara, Elias said softly, voice breaking just slightly on the old name. And you did. For the first time the creature moved, barely. A slight incline of its head, almost imperceptible. But to Elias it was enough. Recognition. Understanding. The high speaker's tone turned to ice. Remove the human from the chamber. 2 wardens advanced. Elias didn't resist. He glanced back once more as they took his arms. Karatha's eyes followed him until the containment field turned opaque. Captain Rourke, the speaker said, you have jeopardized your species standing in this council. Elias twisted free for just a moment, looking up toward the gathered delegates. If defending loyalty is a crime, then maybe you should question your own standing. He was dragged out, boots scraping across the polished floor, the heavy doors sealing behind him with a metallic finality. The noise of the chamber faded into silence. Inside, the creature remained standing in its field of blue light. The guards left, the audience dispersed, the speaker's hologram flickered out. The lights dimmed. For hours it did not move. The energy field hummed around it, a caged storm without purpose. Then, somewhere beyond the walls, a door hissed open. Footsteps, faint, familiar. The creature's head tilted slightly as if listening. No command came. So it waited. Its claws curled once against the floor, the motion deliberate, patient, restrained. The amber glow in its eyes brightened briefly, then dimmed again. Outside, high above Asterion Prime, the council broadcast its verdict to the galaxy. The apex predator has been sentenced to death. But in the stillness of the chamber, the condemned did not rage. It did not mourn. It simply waited, for one voice, the only one it had ever obeyed. And in the darkness between heartbeats, even the stars seemed to hold their breath. The war on Hellan 5 had been the kind of chaos that silenced even the bravest of men. The horizon burned with twin suns, and the air tasted of iron, ozone, and smoke. Captain Elias Rourke crouched behind the fractured remains of a transport crawler, clutching his rifle, eyes scanning the fog-choked battlefield. His unit, what was left of it, was down to 7 soldiers. The rest had been devoured by the swarm. The Dravari moved like a living tide, 6-legged horrors with translucent shells that shimmered in the dim light. They hissed and clicked in the distance, voices of an advancing storm. Elias's comms were dead, his orbital support gone silent. Humanity's first real war beyond its home systems had turned into a massacre. Captain, Corporal Dallin Cruz whispered beside him, voice shaking. They're circling. We won't make it. Elias didn't respond. He knew. The Dravari didn't take prisoners, and no one who'd faced them up close had ever lived to tell how they fought. He checked his rifle, half charge left. He considered ordering a retreat, but retreat to where? The trench behind them was gone. The command post was ash. He could only buy them time. A sound rippled through the battlefield then, deep, resonant, like thunder trapped inside a cavern. The Dravari paused, antennae twitching. Another sound followed, closer this time. A roar, low and primal, vibrating through the ground. The swarm turned toward it as one, their ranks parting. From the haze stepped something enormous. At first, Elias thought it was another Dravari mutation, a new nightmare. But as the form came into focus, he saw the impossible symmetry of muscle and armor, the intelligent gleam behind amber eyes. It moved upright on 2 legs, but its stance was fluid, coiled with controlled power. When the nearest Dravari lunged, the creature moved faster than sight. One blow and the insect shattered. It didn't stop. The battlefield became a blur of violence and precision. Every movement of the creature was measured, surgical. It tore through the swarm, not in blind fury but with eerie efficiency. And then it stopped, standing amidst a carpet of alien corpses, breathing steady, its gaze sweeping until it found Elias. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Elias raised his rifle on instinct, finger tightening on the trigger. The creature tilted its head, studying him. The distance between them vanished in seconds. One leap, a blur of motion, and suddenly Elias was on his back, pinned, his weapon flung aside. The creature's claws pressed against his chest plate, sharp enough to pierce. Its breath was hot, ragged, smelling faintly of ash and something metallic. But it didn't strike. It just stared. Then, with a strange restraint, it pushed off him and stepped back. Cruz shouted, "Captain?" "Orders." Elias slowly rose, eyes locked with the creature's. It didn't move. It waited. He realized then that this thing, this monster, wasn't attacking him because it could tell he wasn't Dravari. It was distinguishing friend from foe. Somehow, impossibly, it understood. "Hold fire," Elias said quietly. "Let's see what it does." The soldiers looked at him like he'd gone mad, but none dared disobey. The creature turned toward the distant rumble of another Dravari wave and crouched low, readying itself. Elias could swear he saw its claws flex in anticipation, but not of hunger, of purpose. When the swarm emerged again, Elias found himself shouting, "On my mark! Engage!" The creature moved with his voice, timed, coordinated, lethal. It covered their flank, ripped apart the attackers before they reached the humans. It was fighting with them. Hours later, the battlefield was silent. The Dravari retreating. Elias stood amid the wreckage, exhaustion and disbelief warring in his mind. The creature approached slowly, lowering itself until its eyes were level with his. For the first time, Elias spoke directly to it. "You understand me?" The creature's head tilted slightly, then it touched its chest with a clawed hand and tapped the same motion on his chest plate, an imitation of acknowledgement. Elias nodded. "All right. You stay close. You follow me." That night, beneath a broken sky, they built a temporary camp. The soldiers refused to sleep, watching the creature as it sat at the edge of the firelight, unmoving. Elias noticed how it turned its head whenever someone spoke, how it seemed to recognize tone, cadence, even command. There was intelligence there, deep and patient. Cruz approached him quietly. "Sir, what do we call it?" Elias thought for a moment. "Kara," he said. Short for Karath, the name the Dravari soldiers kept shouting before they died. Kara didn't react to the name, but when Elias repeated it, softer this time, it looked up. Its eyes reflected the firelight like molten gold. Days became weeks. Kara followed every order without hesitation. It learned formation signals, adapted to weapon patterns, shielded wounded soldiers without needing to be told. In combat it was terrifying, outside it eerily gentle. When they rationed food, Kara refused to eat until the humans had taken their share. When one soldier panicked and fired at it during a night watch, Kara didn't retaliate, it simply stepped back, head bowed. The men began to whisper. Some called it a guardian. Others a curse. But Elias saw something different: discipline, control, loyalty that ran deeper than programming or instinct. Then came the Maw trenches. The Dravari threw everything they had into that offensive. Whole divisions vanished under the swarm. The council fleets hovered above, refusing to send reinforcements until they could assess human viability. Elias knew that meant they were expendable. Pinned in the last defense line, Elias and Kara fought side by side. The creature's claws were a blur, carving paths through the enemy, protecting Elias's position with almost unnatural awareness. When Elias shouted orders, Kara moved before the words finished leaving his mouth. They were no longer man and beast, they were soldiers bonded by survival. When the final wave broke and the Dravari withdrew, the battlefield was littered with corpses, smoke curling over the trenches. Elias stood trembling, armor scorched, rifle out of charge. Kara stood beside him, bloodied but steady. Around them, silence. The council finally arrived days later, ships blotting out the sun. They landed not with gratitude but with containment teams. Kara was surrounded, weapons drawn. Elias tried to intervene, shouting that it was an ally, not an enemy. They didn't listen. Kara didn't fight back. It looked once at Elias, head tilting the same way it had the first day they met, as if asking for orders. Elias shouted, "Stand down." It obeyed instantly. They bounded in energy chains and dragged it away. Elias ran after them, screaming, but the soldiers forced him back. His last glimpse was of Kara turning its head, eyes calm, waiting, as if trusting that its commander would fix everything. He never saw it again. Not until the council chamber years later, when that same creature stood caged, awaiting execution, still silent, still obedient. And as Elias had stood there, watching its amber eyes through the containment field, he understood something terrible and pure. Kara hadn't stopped waiting. It was still following his last command. The rain on Asterion Prime fell like molten glass, streaking against the observation window of the council's high-security research wing. Beneath the storm's glow, the creature known as Karath remained in its containment sphere, motionless, silent, watching. For 3 days since the trial, it had neither eaten nor slept. It merely stood there, its amber eyes fixed on the same point, the sealed door where Elias Rourke had last been dragged out. The council's scientists moved around it like surgeons in a morgue, cloaked in sterile light. They didn't speak much. Every data point, every pulse reading was transmitted silently to the upper tiers. No one dared approach too closely. The containment field hummed at full strength, designed to restrain a being capable of tearing through a starship's hull. Yet even the hum seemed nervous. Dr. Helvin Ara, the lead xenobiologist, adjusted her scanner and frowned. "It's waiting," she murmured to her aide. "For what?" the aide asked. Ara glanced at the steady line of readings. For someone to tell it what to do. She didn't believe in myths, but she'd read the battle reports. The human captain who tamed a predator bred for war. The council had dismissed it as propaganda, but now, seeing the stillness of Karath, she wondered if obedience was all that kept the galaxy safe. Far below the research wing, in a district drowned by artificial night, Elias Rourke sat in a small, windowless room, staring at a holographic screen. Lines of restricted data flickered before him as Dallin Cruz worked furiously at the console. The younger man's fingers moved in a blur, his jaw set with grim determination. "Almost through," Dallin muttered. "Council security's gotten tighter since your stunt." Elias didn't respond. His mind was elsewhere, on the memory of those amber eyes still waiting. Vex Terran, the smuggler who'd agreed to help them, for a price, leaned against the wall watching. "You really plan to go up against the council for that thing?" he said. "It's a death sentence, Rourke. They'll brand you a traitor before the hour's out." Elias looked up. "They already have." A tone chimed softly as the console flashed green. Dallin exhaled. "We're in. Accessing restricted files on Project Null Directive." The hologram expanded, displaying reports, footage, and internal memos stamped classified. Eyes of the 9 only. Elias leaned closer. One file caught his eye, a council memorandum titled Utilization Potential, Karath Neural Schema. He opened it. Lines of cold text filled the air, subject to be terminated post-harvest. Neural lattice to be integrated into experimental fleet AI for combat prediction algorithms. Elias's stomach turned. They weren't executing Karath for safety. They were dissecting him for technology. Dallin swore under his breath. They're going to strip his brain for parts. Elias shut off the display. No. They're going to steal what made him loyal. And they'll twist it into something that won't hesitate next time they give an order. Vex laughed without humor. "You can't stop a council operation. They've got 100 guards, drones, and gods know how many weapons around that facility." Elias stood, his shadow cutting across the dim light. "Then we'll just have to go through them." Dallin looked up sharply. "Sir, that's suicide." Elias's voice softened. "Kara followed every order I ever gave. Even the ones that got him captured. I won't let his last command be obedience unto death." For a moment, silence filled the room. The only sound was the distant hum of the city. Then Dallin sighed and began pulling up schematics of the research complex. "You'll need a diversion. I can reroute their security grid for 2 minutes, maybe less. After that, they'll lock down every exit." Elias nodded. "That's enough." Back in the containment chamber, the creature's gaze flicked to the overhead lights as a tremor ran through the building's power lines. Its senses stretched beyond the visible, attuned to every vibration, every shift in air pressure. The voices of the scientists became distant echoes. It didn't understand their words, but it recognized tone. Fear. Caution. Anticipation. Karatha's memories flickered, battlefields burning, the human's voice calling orders over the roar of war. The words were meaningless, but the sound of command had shaped its existence. To fight. To protect. To wait. Now there was only waiting. Dr. Ara tapped her datapad nervously. Neural scan stable. Increasing field density. The lights dimmed as power rerouted. Karath tilted its head. The hum intensified around it, pressure like the crushing weight of an ocean. Still it didn't move. Outside, Elias's team moved through the undercity tunnels, the air thick with static from the storm. Vex carried a compact disruptor pack. Dallin clutched a stolen Council Idaho. Elias carried nothing but an old pulse pistol and the certainty that he couldn't live with himself if he stayed idle. They reached the outer maintenance hatch beneath the facility. Dallin bypassed the lock with trembling fingers. "Last chance to turn back," he said. Elias smiled faintly. "You've never seen Kara in a fight. When he moves, nothing can stop him. But right now he's waiting. If he's waiting for me, then I damn well need to be there." They entered the narrow passage, silent but for the crackle of exposed wiring. Inside the containment chamber, Ara stepped back as the field stabilized. She looked at the readouts, brows furrowed. Strange. Neural activity spike, subjects responding to external proximity. "Is someone approaching?" her aide asked. "Not within the facility," she said slowly. "But it's reacting as if it senses something familiar." Karatha's claws flexed slightly against the reinforced floor. The motion was deliberate, restrained. It turned its head toward the entrance, muscles coiling beneath the surface. In the tunnels, Dallin froze as a silent alarm pinged on his wrist console. They know someone's inside. Then we move fast, Elias said. The three men sprinted up a maintenance shaft, emerging behind the facility's primary reactor. Alarms began to echo faintly through the corridors above, security protocols activating. Elias's pulse quickened. Every sound, every flicker of red light felt like the countdown of a clock running out. They reached a junction. Dallin pointed upward. Containment chambers through that corridor. Elias drew his pistol, checking the charge. Stay behind me. If we get separated, you run. Vex chuckled. I don't run from payday. Before Elias could reply, the facility shook with the deep vibration of a power surge. In the chamber above, the containment field flickered, blue energy crackling like lightning. Scientists shouted, scrambling for control. Karath lifted its head. The hum faltered for the first time. Elias's team burst through a maintenance hatch, smoke spilling around them. The security drones locked on instantly, energy lances arcing through the air. Dallin dropped the first with a precise shot, sparks showering across the floor. Elias moved fast, ducking behind a console. Kara, he shouted through the chaos, his voice echoing down the corridor. The name carried through the vents, faint but clear. Inside the containment sphere, the creature's eyes ignited like molten metal. Its claws flexed again. The hum roared. The field shuddered. And then, in a soundless burst of light, the containment shattered. Scientists screamed. Alarms wailed. Karath stepped free, the energy crackling off its scales like fire. But it didn't attack. It simply turned toward the source of the voice and waited. Elias stood frozen at the doorway, the blue glow reflecting in his eyes. For a long moment, neither man nor monster moved. Then Elias spoke, voice steady, quiet. With me. Karath bowed its head. And somewhere deep within the council's citadel, systems began to scream warnings across every channel, because the galaxy's most feared weapon had just followed a human command once more. The facility was chaos. Sirens pulsed through the corridors like a heartbeat, red warning lights flickering across polished steel. The air reeked of ozone and scorched circuitry. Elias Rourke moved through the smoke with his weapon drawn, each step measured, each breath sharp with adrenaline. Behind him, Dallin and Vex struggled to keep pace, the noise of automated turrets whirring to life echoing through the halls. Then the sound changed. A single metallic groan vibrated through the building, followed by silence so heavy it pressed against the lungs. Elias looked up just as a shadow passed over the glass corridor ahead, a vast shape, upright and powerful, outlined in blue light. Karath stepped through the shattered containment gate, its scales glimmering with fractured arcs of energy, its eyes fixed on him. For a moment, time fractured. All the years between Hellion 5 and now dissolved, replaced by the same silent understanding. The creature had not escaped for vengeance. It had come because it heard its commander's voice. Guards flooded into the passageway, weapons raised. Fire, someone shouted. Beams of white light filled the air, cutting through smoke and glass. Karath moved before Elias could think. Its body blurred into motion. Speed and violence fused into something that defied biology. It tore through the drones, not with rage but precision, each strike ending in silence rather than brutality. Elias took cover beside a scorched wall, firing controlled bursts at the advancing guards. Dallin, override the inner locks, he shouted. On it. Dallin replied, sprinting toward a console, his fingers flying across the keys. Vex covered him, muttering curses under his breath as stray energy blasts scorched the floor beside him. You said this thing follows orders, he yelled. Maybe tell it not to crush us in the process. Elias risked a glance toward Karath. The creature moved past a group of fallen soldiers and came to a halt beside him, lowering its massive head. Elias could see burn marks searing across its shoulders where the containment field had failed. Even wounded, it waited. You're still following my lead, Elias murmured, almost in disbelief. Karath's breathing was steady, deep, controlled. The air around it shimmered faintly, charged with residual energy. Elias met its gaze. We're getting out of here, Kara. Stay with me. The creature inclined its head once, then turned sharply toward the oncoming reinforcements. Its motion was clean, surgical. The same discipline that once made it a weapon now guided it as a shield. Dallin's console chimed. Security doors disengaged. But we've got a full lockdown in 30 seconds. Move! Elias shouted. They sprinted down the corridor, boots hammering against metal. Behind them, Karath followed, each stride shaking the floor. Automated turrets pivoted from the ceiling, locking onto the largest heat signature. Karath turned and took the barrage, shielding the humans behind its frame. Sparks erupted as beams struck its armor like hide, but it didn't falter. Elias aimed upward and fired at the turret's power core, the explosion lighting the hallway in white flame. Karath lowered its head, smoke curling from its skin, but no sound of pain escaped it. Vex stumbled as debris rained down. "Tell me we've got an exit plan." Elias pointed ahead. "Freight bay. North side. There's a shuttle pad, if it's still there." They burst into the wide hangar where rows of ships sat under automated clamps. The power flickered in the storm outside, flashes of lightning painting the world beyond the transparent bay doors. Elias scanned the area. The council's guards were already mobilizing. Too many. Karath stepped forward, chest rising, breath deep and resonant. It looked to Elias, awaiting command. He hesitated. The last time he'd given an order like this, the result had ended the war, and cost them both their freedom. But hesitation meant death now. He met Karath's gaze. "Defend. Non-lethal if possible." The creature lunged forward, obeying instantly. It struck like a living storm, knocking soldiers aside, disarming them with terrifying precision. Weapons clattered across the floor as Karath moved through the ranks, leaving bruises and broken pride instead of corpses. Dallin and Vex raced toward a small transport shuttle at the far end of the bay. Elias followed, firing at the control panel to override the launch locks. Karath covered their retreat, each movement purposeful, silent. It didn't roar. It didn't gloat. It simply did as it was told. The ship's engines roared to life, their sound merging with the thunder outside. Elias turned back as the hangar doors began to close. "Kara," he called. The creature bounded toward him, its massive frame catching the light from the storm. A plasma bolt streaked through the air, grazing its side. Karath staggered but kept moving, crashing through the narrowing gap just as the doors sealed shut. The impact shook the shuttle's hull. Inside, the team scrambled for balance. Karath crouched near the rear bulkhead, one hand braced against the floor. The smell of burned ozone filled the air. Elias grabbed the controls, shouting over the noise. "Hold on." The shuttle lifted, engines straining, streaking upward through the dark storm. Below, the council's towers flared with emergency lights as interceptors scrambled in pursuit. Dallin manned the rear guns, firing bursts of plasma to hold them off. Vex cursed as a warning light flared on the dashboard. "They're locking missiles." Elias pushed the throttle forward, feeling the strain in the ship's frame. "Not if we hit atmosphere first." Lightning flashed around them, swallowing the shuttle in white brilliance. The sky broke open, revealing the black curve of space beyond. The sudden stillness that followed was almost unbearable. Alarms quieted. The storm faded into silence. Elias leaned back in his seat, chest heaving. For a moment, none of them spoke. The stars spread out before them, cold and infinite. Then Dallin turned from the gunner's seat, his expression pale. "They'll hunt us, sir. Every ship, every outpost. There's no going back." Elias didn't look away from the viewport. "I know." Behind them, Karath shifted, lowering itself to the deck. Its wounds were shallow, but its energy was drained. Elias approached slowly, the deck creaking under the creature's weight. "You could have run," Elias said quietly. "You could have escaped without me." Karath tilted its head, amber eyes steady. Then, with deliberate care, it lowered itself further, until its gaze was level with his. Elias reached out, placing a hand against the creature's arm. The heat of it was almost unbearable, the steady pulse beneath the armor reminding him of something impossibly alive. "You waited," he whispered. "All this time you waited." For the first time since Helan 5, Karath blinked slowly, the motion precise and deliberate. It wasn't language. It didn't need to be. Dallin's voice broke through the moment. "We've cleared orbit." "Where to?" Elias hesitated, still watching the creature. "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere they won't look for monsters or men." Vex gave a tired laugh. "That rules out most of the galaxy." Elias allowed himself a thin smile. "Then we'll make our own corner of it." The shuttle turned, engines dimming as it slipped into the shadow of a dead moon. Behind them, the capital world glowed like an accusation, burning in the dark. Elias stood beside Karath, the silence between them heavy with all that had been lost and all that still waited to be done. He looked once more at the stars ahead, their cold light stretching toward endless horizons. "You're free now," he said softly. Karath's gaze didn't waver. It lowered its head once more, a single, precise motion that carried more meaning than words ever could. It was free. But it still waited, for command, for purpose, for the only voice it had ever trusted to give either. And Elias knew, as the shuttle drifted into the dark between worlds, that freedom was a fragile thing when bound by loyalty. The shuttle drifted through the grave silence of space, the stars beyond like cold embers scattered across an endless sea. Inside, the hum of the engines was the only heartbeat left. Elias Rourke sat at the cockpit, eyes fixed on the dying light of the capital world far behind them. Dallin and Vex were asleep in the aft compartment, exhaustion finally winning over fear. But Karath was awake. Always awake. The creature sat near the viewport, motionless yet impossibly alert. Every flicker of light that danced across its scaled form reflected 1,000 battles fought and survived. It had once been a living weapon, a myth shaped by the Council's science and the cruelty of necessity. Now it was something else entirely. Something undefined. Elias leaned back in his chair, rubbing his face. The stubble on his jaw scratched against his palm, grounding him in the moment. "We can't keep running," he said quietly as if speaking to himself. Karath turned its head slightly, one molten eye shifting toward him. It didn't speak, it never had, but Elias had long since learned to read the creature's silences. He could feel the question there as tangible as breath. "Then what will you do, Commander?" "The Council won't let this go," Elias said. "They'll send fleets. Assassins. Even the damn clerics from the Ascendancy Corps if they have to. They'll call us traitors. And you," he looked up, meeting the alien's gaze. "They'll call you a mistake." Karatha's jaw flexed slightly, a sign of irritation or perhaps restrained fury. Its claws traced faint grooves into the metal deck. Elias could almost hear the echo of its unspoken thought. Then let them come. Before he could respond, the ship's console chirped. A proximity alert, faint but insistent. Elias straightened. The sensor display flickered, showing a fast-moving contact approaching from the shadow of a nearby moon. Too fast to be debris. Too quiet to be civilian. Dallin stumbled into the cockpit, half awake, weapon in hand. "What is it?" "Hunter ship," Elias said grimly. "Council signature. They found us." Karath rose to its full height, shoulders brushing the ceiling, tail coiling with silent anticipation. Its presence filled the shuttle with tension, the air seeming to hum with barely restrained power. "Power up the shields," Elias ordered. "Vex, wake up and prep the rear turrets." The younger man's voice came groggy through the comm. "You said we were going quiet." "Plans changed." The ship shuddered as the first salvo struck, shields flaring in bright blue arcs. Karatha's head snapped toward the sound, muscles tightening. Dallin cursed under his breath, fingers flying across the controls. "We can't take many more of those." "Then we don't," Elias said. "Karath now." The creature moved instantly, pushing past the cockpit door and tearing open the maintenance hatch. It reached into the core chamber, claws deft despite their size, rerouting conduits and siphoning power directly through its body. The lights dimmed and for a moment, the ship's hum deepened to a resonant growl, as if it were alive. Outside, the shuttle's engines flared bright white, surging forward in a burst of speed that knocked the pursuing vessel off its trajectory. Dallin hooped. "You gave it overdrive." "Karath gave it overdrive," Elias corrected, gripping the controls. "Hold on." The ship dove toward the moon's surface, weaving between craters and canyons. Plasma fire streaked behind them, burning holes through the void. The pursuing hunter adjusted, trying to match their movements, but Elias knew their pilot's arrogance. He counted the seconds between bursts, the rhythm of the chase. "Dallin," he said evenly, "when I say now, cut power to everything except life support." The younger man blinked. "That'll drop our shields." "Exactly." The hunter ship loomed closer, locking on. Elias waited, watching the readings climb, distance closing, weapons primed, targeting complete. The final tone chirped on the console. "Now." The shuttle went dark. Every system blinked out, the engines silent. To the hunter's sensors, they vanished, a dead craft drifting through the void. The hunter overshot, speeding past them. Elias grinned. "Gotcha." "Powering back." Dallin shouted, slamming the switches forward. Karath turned its head toward the viewport, sensing what was about to happen. Elias fired the thrusters, flipping the shuttle in a violent roll that brought their front cannons to bear. Fire. Twin bursts of plasma erupted from the ship's nose, slamming into the hunter's engines. The explosion bloomed across the moon's horizon, scattering debris into a glowing arc. The shockwave rippled through the void, shaking the shuttle. When the silence returned, only fragments of light remained. Elias exhaled slowly, his pulse hammering. That's one less problem. Dallin gave a shaky laugh, slumping into his seat. You're insane, Commander? Vex's voice came through the comm again. Insane works. For now. But Karath wasn't celebrating. It stared out at the drifting wreckage, eyes narrowing, posture tense. Elias followed its gaze and saw why. Another signal. Fainter, deeper. A fleet's worth. The Council hadn't sent one ship. They'd sent an armada. Dallin's face went pale. There's no outrunning that. Elias rose slowly from his chair. His eyes burned with something that wasn't fear. We don't run, he said quietly. We finish what they started. Karath turned toward him fully, straightening to its full height. In the creature's eyes, something fierce burned, not rage, not hunger, but purpose. The same purpose that had once made it follow his every command. Elias looked around the cockpit, his voice calm despite the storm gathering beyond. They'll come for both of us. You because you're too powerful to control, me because I dare to see you as more than that. But we're not their weapons anymore. The ship's alarm pulsed again, closer now, the first cruisers breaking orbit, spreading into attack formation. Dallin whispered, we can't fight them all. Elias placed a hand on Karatha's forearm, steady and sure. We don't have to fight all of them. Just the one that leads. He turned back to the console, pulling up the fleet's signature data. The lead ship's name glowed across the display, Judicator's Wrath. Elias's jaw tightened. That was the same ship that had ordered Karatha's termination. Set course for the flagship, he said. Elias, Dallin started, but the commander's tone left no room for argument. Now. Karath moved to the viewport, claws digging into the metal as the stars shifted. Its body thrummed with restrained energy, the faint glow of biotic power crawling along its limbs. It knew what was coming. And it welcomed it. The shuttle surged forward, cutting through the void like a blade. The fleet loomed ahead, thousands of guns, countless soldiers, and one shared belief, that they could control everything they feared. Elias leaned forward, voice low, steady. They made you a monster, Kara. Let's remind them what that really means. The creature let out a sound, low, resonant, a note that carried through the ship and into the very bones of space. It wasn't a roar. It was a declaration. As the Judicator's wrath filled the viewport, Elias locked weapons and whispered the same order that had ended a war years ago. Engage. Karath leapt from the ship as the shuttle's cannons ignited, the stars erupting into fire. And somewhere in that burning dark, the universe finally learned what happens when the deadliest predator doesn't act on instinct, but on loyalty.